it was a really easy transition, or a natural transition, to go from working in a soap to becoming part of the Stockacre Waterman PWL factory. I was a good part of the machinery, because that's what I did. I turn up to work on time, you put what I have to do in front of me, and I do it. So I did fit in really well. There was times where it was a little frustrating or nerve-wracking or just difficult, because I was juggling Neighbours and trying to record. I think I did my part of the album in 2 weeks or something ridiculous. But now I fully appreciate that, why they call themselves a hit factory. It's what they did, and I feel quite honoured to have been part of that history. Being at the centre of all of that hype and all of that success, it was like being in the eye of a storm. There's so much that I missed. A lot of it was a blur at the time. I just remember, it's a different country every 1 or 2 days. Well, Michael was instrumental in lots of ways, and lots of parts of my life at that time. Actually, still is today, I suppose. But that was more, I guess, in the last couple of years with PWL, and then, I'm sure he encouraged me to move on, but I don't remember doing that because of something that Michael said. Come to think of it, people wondered what the hell I was doing at that time, because I left Neighbours, which was the #1 show. I was there for 2.5 years. Then I leave PWL. It was the end of my contract. I didn't break it, but decided to leave after that. And I remember people saying, "What are you doing?" And it was just instinctive. I didn't really know what I was doing when I left PWL. I did meet with various record companies, and Deconstruction, I liked their attitude. I quite like their arrogance. I like the vision that they had. It was all very new and exciting, and there wouldn't be much point to leave PWL and go somewhere else exactly the same. So it was a big change. It was certainly not as successful as the time with PWL, but I think it did what needed to be done. When I was 4, my mother put me into music class. I was with a bunch of other raucous 4- and 5-year-olds, banging, making noises with sticks and glockenspiels and whatever. And my parents never forced any of us to kind of choose this career path. My mum was really keen to give us the option and just to introduce us to different artistic and creative ventures, and specifically music. I played piano, flute, violin till I was about 13, by which time I'd become a slave to pop music, and an acquaintance of my mother worked in the casting department of a production company, and they needed a little girl for this role. I ended up getting a different role with that company. So started acting when I was 9. I never intended to be a singer. I always loved singing, and I remember being 16 years old on the set of The Henderson Kids, which was a mini-series I did, and another one of the girls, Nadine Garner. The two of us used to sing all the time. So I did love it. I loved it when I was even little. There were like 8 or 9 singing degrees, thinking or wishing that I could be Olivia Newton-John. But after I'd worked when I was 16, when I was 17, I had a little bit of money, so I recorded a demo tape with 3 songs on it. But I didn't do that to become a singer. I did it because I thought it would be helpful, more strings to your bow as an actor. So I was working and finishing my last 2 years of high school. But yeah, it was Neighbours that was the one where I started to get recognised and had to suddenly deal with being slightly famous. The song with Nick Cave, it's got quite a history. I actually remember Michael Hutchence saying to me, "My friend Nick wants to do a song with you, was interested in doing something with you." And I actually didn't know too much about Nick Cave before I met him. So that was years ago. And then I'd seen a photo of Nick Cave on tour with a Kylie bag, and I think I might have even seen or heard something else. These little things throughout the years. And when it finally came to it, I was in Melbourne, and he was in Melbourne at the same time, and we were on the same record label by this time. So the message came through that he was interested in having me duet with him on the Murder Ballads album. Had to speed read a biography on Nick Cave, which of course had me going, oh, that was fantastic. And he was leaving a message with my mom because I was staying at home with my parents, and I would call back and leave a message with his mum. So it wasn't rock and roll like people might expect. Hi, is Nick there? Can you just let him know that Kylie called? Long story short, the day that I recorded my vocals for Where the Wild Roses Grow was the first day I met Nick, and I think that added a lot to the song and the tenderness and the sexual tension and the kind of the frailty of that song. Locomotion came about. There was a charity concert that was organised for a football club, and a bunch of us from Neighbours decided we'd help out. I think there were some big supporters of this team in the cast, and I've always believed that any given TV cast and crew, film cast and crew, you can make a band, because there's always someone that fancies themselves as a drummer and someone a singer. So we formed this little band, and I can't even remember the song we did. It was another song. We came off stage and we were all just buzzing from doing this live gig. And we said, should we go out again? We had nothing prepared, and I said, why don't we do Locomotion? Everyone knows Locomotion, and did it. Very, very pop fairy tale stuff. There was a guy who worked at the TV station where we shot Neighbours and produced a music show, and he came up to me afterwards and said, that was really good, you should make a record. And I do recall thinking, I could make a video. I was really excited about the video. So I did record a demo of Locomotion, and the demo vocals were the vocals that stayed on Locomotion, which became a hit around the world. Impossible Princess did have not the luck that I was used to having. I'm really glad for that experience, even for everything that didn't work about it. It was actually, I think it was essential that I went through that experience. Actually, people ask me a lot, did you think it was all over? And not in an egotistical way, just in a natural way. I just thought, well, there's things I have to do. I never thought that was it. What I did do was go back to Australia, because the album had actually been really successful there, and go on tour. And it was like prescribing medicine for myself. Go where it is appreciated, where you don't have to keep dealing with people. This happened. You must be so depressed. Parlophone. Well, I think we found each other at the right time. When I finished with Deconstruction, again met with a few different record companies. This time, they all pretty much said the same thing. We want to make a pop album with you, da-di-da-di-da. I said, that's great, that's what I want to do as well. So we launched into Light Years with that attitude. I had a few keywords that were poolside, disco, cocktail, beach, hence, Love Boat, Cuckoo, all those type of songs. It was really indulgent and unashamed. We just went, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be as camp as I can possibly be, and just go for it. And everyone loved it. And so that's obviously what was right at that time, and was a beautiful beginning with Parlophone. And I had to work that record a lot throughout Europe to remind people, well, I guess to reintroduce myself. And it was called a comeback, and I didn't mind that at all. I really didn't. I thought it was pretty appropriate in a lot of places. So we came back with Spinning Round, and I remember listening to the radio, waiting and waiting to hear. And when I finally heard that it was number one, I actually was speechless. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. I just walked into the room and there was people waiting. They knew I'd gone out to get the call. Must have been thinking, what on earth can we say? And I just walked in, just went and cried. And that was that. The link from the initial demo of Locomotion is I got my record deal with Mushroom Records in Australia with that, and they had an engineer / producer called Mike Duffy in Australia at the time, who was from PWL, and he was in Australia working on some different projects, so they asked him to produce Locomotion. He did that. That was number one for 7 weeks, and then I guess that because Neighbours was successful at that time in England, I guess the next logical step was to try and repeat that success here. So we met up with PWL. The first track I recorded with them was I Should Be So Lucky, so that ended up being the first single here. So, yeah, decided to take matters into my own hand, get to Australia, get on the road, and it was an invaluable experience because then it's right in front of you. You see what people are responding to, what they liked best, what they didn't really, And that was when I brought in the showgirl. She came into the concert. It was about, I think from memory, 4 songs that was suddenly very pink. Boys with pink feather fans on them, and the image that eventually led to the Olympics, the showgirl thing at the Olympics, that really has become just part of me. I don't think she's going to go away in a hurry, that's for sure. So it was a really important time. What's it like being Kylie? It's... I'm still in the eye of a storm. They're all giggling at me because they just like, I don't know. I just try and cope. Some days I feel like I'm actually in a madhouse, but when I talk about touring, that is exciting. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense is weeks and months of promotion, and I defy any artist to say that they really like it. You can, hey, it's enjoyable in small doses, but that is the draining part. And sometimes the press intrusion is a little much to cope with as well. But basically, it's all good.
I've always been very ambitious from quite an early age, actually. Always loved to perform, and actually I really pursued a career in dance, and I went to Performing Arts College, and I always wanted to sing, but I didn't really have a lot of confidence in my voice, and I'd left college and I'd been unemployed for about a year when I auditioned for a girl band. And I was very excited, and I said to all my mates, this is it, this is what I want to do. I don't want to be a dancer, I want to do this. And luckily it happened, so, I became a Spice Girl. There was an audition at a dance studio in London, and I think we were in groups of about 20 or something, and there was hundreds of girls there. And we had to dance to an Eternal song, just freestyle. Oh, to do it now I'd be mortified. And then we went in. I think they picked girls from the dancing who looked all right and could keep in time. And then, you know, we would go in and sing a piece with a pianist. We actually got together as a band in 1993. And we released our first single in 1996. For 3 years, we were becoming professionals, darling. No, we were slogging, we were working out, we were working together vocally, you know, we were working together with harmonies. We did, in the early days, we did a bit of writing. We were doing other people's tracks, we did showcases. And then we really we left our first manager. We were on our own for about a year. And we'd met lots of producers and co-writers, and we started working, and we'd actually written an album's worth of material. And we went along, we were looking for managers, and that's when we met Simon Fuller. So we actually went to Simon Fuller with the first album written, and all looking like we did, very individual with our whole girl power thing going on. So there's a bit of a misconception that we were, you know, manufactured. We appeared to be very manufactured. We were very well marketed, but we'd actually done most of the groundwork ourselves. It was something we didn't really speak about that much, but we all had a feeling that we were going to do it and we were going to be massive. And that was kind of our thing. It was like world domination. That was our phrase. We just wanted to conquer the world. And also in the early days, we'd come up against a lot of sexism, really, because boy bands were really big at the time. They'd been selling loads of records for years. Girl bands did okay, but never nothing, you know, to compare with what boy bands were doing. So that got our backs up a little bit. So that's where the whole girl power thing came from. And then, you know, when we started going around record companies, there was a lot of interest and it started getting really exciting. There was a big buzz in the industry about us. And from that day, it just flew, you know, first single came out and they were saying, you know, top 10. And we were like, oh. And it was like, it went in at number 3 and we just couldn't believe it. Next week it was number 1, stayed at number 1 for 7 weeks. And from that day until, you know, we completed the tour in '98, our feet didn't touch the ground. As time goes on, I look back at the Spice Girls more and more fondly. But at the time, it was very, very hard because you're exhausted. A lot of travelling, miss your family. But at the same time, it's the most amazing thing that could happen to anybody who would wish that upon themselves. You know, I'm really grateful that it happened to me, but it was tough. Although there are a lot of these pop shows and, you know, talent shows and pop idol things, I don't think that they really realise what they're getting themselves into. And I think it's quite worrying as well, because, you know, obviously they've all been spawned from the success of the Spice Girls. And, you know, record companies see something works, makes money, and they jump on the bandwagon. So, you know, a lot of these kids are, you know, really being used as pawn. I was probably one of the quieter members of the band. And I don't know, you know, I suppose I had a few issues with myself, really. I always wanted to be more of an extrovert, but I wasn't. And I wasn't ready to accept that about myself. So I did give myself quite a hard time in the early days. And then, you know, in the latter days of the Spice Girls, once we completed the world tour in '98 and I went and started recording Northern Star, I had this newfound freedom and I had such a great time. And I thought, oh, I can't be doing with all that band politics and, you know, and being, having to compromise musically and as an individual, you know, even in interviews I'd, you know, be really worried about everything that I said because it would reflect on the other girls. And I just thought, oh, I could get used to this. And that was kind of the beginning of the end for me as a Spice Girl. Well, I think, you know, we'd all decided to take a break after the world tour ended because we were all so tired. And Melanie and Victoria were pregnant, of course, but I wasn't ready to stop. And I was, you know, really eager to get into the studio and do some solo work. And that's when, you know, I got itchy feet. I think it was something I always wanted to do. When I had dreams and ambitions as a child to be a pop star, it was never in a band. You know, I wanted to be like Madonna. And so I never realised I'd be lucky enough to be in a band, especially the biggest girl band that ever existed, you know. You don't think that's going to happen to you. So when that did happen to me, I still had the dream of doing stuff on my own. I bumped into him, we were in LA, and I was touring with the girls, and I just bumped into him in a hotel elevator. And he just came over and said hello to my mum, because she's a massive fan. And he was really, really sweet. We swapped numbers, and then he just called me up when he come home and, you know, and said, I've got this track I'd like you to sing on. Having the opportunity to work with Bryan Adams was another big confidence builder. you know, he's a fantastic musician. He's an old pro, you know, and to want to work with me. And I think to be picked out of the Spice Girls as well, I want to work with that one, it was like very flattering. So that did give me a lot more confidence. I'm very insecure, you know, about my talent, if I've got any, you know, but I just know I love to do it. And up until now, I've been pretty successful. So, so I must be doing something right. But, you know, these people were interested in working with me. And it was difficult to go into the studio on my own because, you know, I am quite shy. But they were so lovely and I had so much support and they were really, really encouraging. And it gave me a lot of confidence in myself because, you know, these fabulous producers and, you know, writers and musicians were saying such lovely things about me and you know, really helping me out that it made me think, well, I think because I had the opportunity to do that. And I don't want to miss out on anything. And also I find it really difficult to say no to people too. But luckily I haven't really wanted to say no to anyone because most of the people that I've wanted to work with me, I've been big fans of their previous work. And on meeting them, they've been really great people and we've had a really good rapport. And it wasn't that that anybody wasn't allowing me to have that freedom in the band. It was that it wasn't right for the band. You know, I was part of this band and my role in this band, you know, was a certain thing. But as an individual, you know, I had a whole new thing. I thought I could do something good. I had the confidence in myself that I could come up with something good. But when it was finished, I was like, I didn't think it would be that good. I was really, really pleased, really quite shocked. And, you know, quite naively, I thought, the world's going to love it, you know, and everyone's going to accept me as a solo artist. But it didn't quite work out like that. It took quite a bit of time for people to realise that there was more to me than Sporty Spice. At the time, it was difficult, but the audience was pretty much split 50-50, you know. Half of them were listening and quite intrigued, and half of them just didn't want to know, and there was a good few bottles chucked at me. But it was great, you know what, I'm so glad I did it, because since that, nothing has been as difficult as that, you know. So it was a good start, thrown in at the deep end. I'm from a very working class background, so I don't know any other way really, and I wouldn't want success like that. I really truly believe that I want to work for everything that I achieve. So so that's what I did, and you know, luckily a few of the tunes were very radio friendly and I got big singles, but I just toured and toured and toured, and you know, got lots of support from my fans. If I'd have gone straight in with a #1 with my first single, I think I would have felt it was off the back of the Spice Girls. And now, you know, with my solo work, I really do feel responsible for the success of things. I mean, there are hundreds of people involved in making the record, in promoting the record. You know, I've got my band, so many people involved, it's not just me. But, you know, I do feel responsible for the success, whereas, you know, before I would have maybe thought, well, that's because I was a Spice Girl. I've got lots of Spice Girls fans, but, you know, they're all growing up too. And it did broaden as well. There was more guys in the audience, 20-somethings, 30-somethings. Got a big gay and lesbian following. So, you know, it's a big fan base and it's really nice. You actually feel sick. You physically feel ill when you read something about yourself. But as time goes on, they write more and more, and it gets more and more ridiculous, or it gets more and more cruel, and it just becomes to not really matter anymore. And although I don't think you ever completely get used to it and it never affects you, you get more used to it and you can kind of, you know, it hurts less and less. It does get you like that, and you know, and it's such a shame. I was talking to George Michael last night. I was doing Top of the Pops and he was there, and he was saying the same thing. You know, love to make music, love to perform music, and it's such a shame that so much crap comes with it, and it does almost put you off doing it. It really, really does. But there's something inside you that makes you want to carry on. It's not as bad as it could be. I think, you know, there is a slight element, as much respect as you can have from the tabloids. I think I've got a slight bit, because they know I'm not playing the game. I actually went back in just to see what was going to happen. I wasn't definitely going in to make a second record at that point. I mean, there was definitely going to be a second album, but at the time it was like, let's just see. Let's see what happens. Most of the time I don't even think. I'll meet somebody, go into the studio and see what happens. And for me, you know, I like to keep it like that. It is very easy. Sometimes I wonder if I'm a bit lazy. I don't know. But, you know, but it works. I think it's, you know, it's all in there, so it's got to come out eventually. in one of the first sessions I was working with Marius de Vries, and one of the first songs we started working on was Here It Comes Again. And that was the song that made me go, right, this is it, we're starting the second album. This is going to be a single, and it's going to be on the record. So that was the start of the album. I started in November 2001, and then it was mastered at the end of January 2003. So I think that's 15 months. It's long enough. It's not too long, and it's long enough. And then when it came to the album title, it was like, because it's quite a tough one. And I just felt Reason was quite appropriate. For me, I love to make music. I love to perform music. For me, music is my reason. So without wanting to sound cheesy, that's why. Because he wanted to work with me, and I knew that he'd done a lot of soundtracks and a great track with Björk, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm working with David Arnold. People would go, oh, you're working with David Arnold? I'd be like, why? And they're like, oh my God, he is amazing. And people started really freaking me out, and I was thinking, oh, intimidation. So I met him, and he lives very close to me actually, so we were working in a local studio, which I can walk to in 10 minutes from my house, which was great. And he is just a scream. Great guy, loads of fun. And we just hit it off straight away. And, the first song we wrote together, Home, and, I love it. And hopefully, I'll work with him again. I mean, I can't speak for all of the girls, but for me, the band was over anyway. I think it'd run its course, really. I think all the Spice Girls feel the same. It's so funny, isn't it? We still call ourselves Spice Girls, but we are, and we're very proud. But you know what? Leave it where it was. It was great at the time. We couldn't do it again. It'd be an embarrassment.
I saw the New Kids on the Block when I was 8, and I'm really embarrassed that people know this about me. And I say it's a life-changing event, but not because of the music, not involving the music whatsoever. It was one of my first concerts, and all I remember was showing up and just being in complete awe of the whole thing, and seeing these girls passing out in my row and being pulled out on stretchers, and I thought, this is the greatest thing. From that day on, I kept telling my parents I wanted to be a famous singer when I grew up. I think that there are people who are just born to do certain things in life, and for instance, my dad is an amazing plumbing contractor, and I think he was born to be a plumbing contractor, and I just happened to be a singer. I had a very active imagination, first of all, and I always had this need to get my feelings out and share them, and it so first started with writing, and after I would start writing, I would start hearing melodies in my head, and I would start trying to find words to them and start making up these songs before I played any instrument. So I would write down the music and begged my parents for an instrument. And at first I wanted a piano, and they said absolutely not. There's no room for it in the house. And so finally, years down the road, right before my 14th birthday, they were just finally sick of hearing me beg for a guitar, and they got me one, and I immediately started teaching myself how to play. It was the most exciting thing, and my parents definitely knew I was serious, because they said I no longer was sitting out watching TV at night. I would just disappear into my room. I saw some ads for summer festivals, and they said they needed local talent to play, and so I sent in a demo tape. It said send in a demo tape, and went to my parents first actually and said, Mom, Dad, I need to make a demo tape. And they're like, what are we doing? Who is this girl? Why us? And so my parents said, all right. And I got my voice teacher, Gina, and her husband to help me record a 3-song demo of my songs, and told my dad and my mom, please, will you send this off? So I got this call back, and the people from the festival said, this is great, we want you to play. So, how many passes do you need? How will you get, do you know which gate to arrive at and everything? My dad was like, well, we need passes for her mom and me, I'm her father, and her family. And the person on the other end was like, wait, your father, how old is she? And he's like, 14. And the guy was just like, oh, we can't have a 14-year-old playing on the main stage. So they moved me to the little small children's stage by the petting zoo and the train that would go around in circles. And but what was great was I went up and I was sound checking, and the two sound guys said, you shouldn't be playing on the stage, you can't be playing on the stage, and took me and set me up so I was able to perform acoustic between the times when the big bands on the main stage were setting up. So I got upgraded on my first gig, and after that it was school lunches, it was more art festivals, it was state fairs, it was store openings, anything I could get my hands on, I just had to play. One day I get this call from a family friend of ours, and she worked at a timeshare resort. She sold timeshares, and they have this thing where they say if you come in to take a tour of our property, we'll give you $100. And it's a long tour, but this guy came through and said, okay, $100, I'm in, and took the tour. And our friend started asking him, said, where are you from, what do you do? And he said, I'm from Los Angeles and I'm in the music business. She's like, hold on, wait a minute, I know this girl. And he's like, oh great, why did I even have to speak up? Why did I have to tell him, why couldn't I be a teacher? And she says, there's this 14-year-old girl who I know, she plays guitar and writes music, and you have to meet her. And he said, well, here's my card, just have her mail something. I really don't feel like doing that today. And they went off on the tour. And meanwhile, she's on the phone calling me saying, you better get back here, you better get down here before they're finished, because you have to meet him and bring a demo tape. And so here I am running frantically around the house, and I wasn't old enough to drive, and my parents were not home, and I'm going, I can't get there on time, how am I going to get this guy my tape? And we live by a golf course, and so a lot of people they actually own their own golf carts. And I went outside and I went to my neighbor's house, and I saw a Harley Davidson golf cart, and the keys were in the ignition, and I went, you know what, thank you for letting me borrow it. And I jumped in it, and without permission actually, and drove it down to the resort, where I found him right as he was coming out of the building, handed him the demo tape, met him, and he said he would call, and I really thought he wouldn't. So I'm sitting home a few weeks later, and the phone rang, and I answered, and this man on the other line said, hi, is Michelle Branch there? And I thought it was odd for an old man to be calling and asking for me. Not old man, an older man. And I was like, yeah, this is her. And he's like, hi, you remember me? It's Jeff Rabian, you gave me demo tape. And my heart dropped to the floor, and I was just like, oh my God, someone actually called back. I haven't been writing the wrong telephone number on all these tapes. And he said, I really think you're talented, and I want to help you out. And I want to talk to your parents. And from then on, so it began that Jeff Rabian is still my manager 5 years later. He started asking me what my goals were as far as my career, and I told him, obviously I want to make albums, and I, want to try to take this to the highest level I possibly can. And he said, well, we can make demos, and I'll start shopping around and showing people, showing some friends of mine in the business, and we'll see what happens. And I said, well, I don't want to make demos, I want to make an indie record. Let's do it right. We'll make like a 10-song album. You can use it as the demo, and I can sell it at my shows. And so that was the basis for my independent album, Broken Bracelet. My manager called me and said, are you sitting down? I was like, yeah. And he said, well, Hanson heard your record, Broken Bracelet, and they want you to open up for them on tour, just playing acoustic guitar. And I have to admit, being a 15-year-old girl, and it was definitely very exciting. And so I packed up my guitar and headed out to California, and I open up for Hanson, and at the end of my show, my manager came back and said, I want you to meet this man who works at Maverick Records. He came back and he said, I'm gonna offer you a record deal. And that was it. And that's how I got my record deal with Maverick. While the paperwork was going on, they flew me out to LA, and I started meeting with producers and writers and basically anyone who they thought I could possibly somehow collaborate with. They asked me a lot of questions. What records do you like? What do you want to sound like? Everything. And it was all very exciting. And they asked me, what song is on radio that you like right now? And I had to think for a while because there wasn't much that I really liked on the radio. But there was a BB Mac song, funny enough. I think it was called Back Here. And I said, I want to find out who produced that. And they said, all right, I think it's a man named John Shanks. And they came back and they said, John Shanks did the BB Mac song, but he's working with Stevie Nicks right now. And I went, okay, who is this guy who's doing these pop songs that sound guitar-oriented, who's working with Stevie Nicks? I couldn't believe it. I was like, I have to meet this guy. And we met and just immediately hit it off. Our first day, we wrote a song in 4 hours. We ended up finishing the album in 35 days. You can imagine that the energy that was around the project was just, it was just through the roof because everyone was so sincerely involved in it. And so they all had their hearts in it. And since it was my first record, we were just all working so quickly, and we would never stop and second guess anything we were doing because everything just seemed to be right. We were in the studio, finished mixing, and invited the whole record company down, including all the CEOs. Everyone except for Madonna basically showed up. And we set them all in a room, and they gave me the big pep talk before everyone got there. They said, you know, they're not going to let you know if it's good or not, because that means, you know, if they walk in and say it's a smash and it doesn't end up being one, it's their fault, and they're going to be really kind of wishy-washy about it. And I'm sitting here just so nervous to meet everybody, and they walk in and we played them everywhere first, and the song stopped and everyone kind of stood there and didn't know what to think. And here I am, this like little girl in the jeans and a t-shirt, and they're just like, what's going on here? And the head radio guy turned and looked at everyone in the room and sat up and goes, this is a fucking smash. And he goes, let's hear it again. And we just all just looked at each other like, it was a big sigh of relief. When it first came out, they said, this single has the potential audience of over 1 billion people. And that's when I was just like, whoa, what do I do now? And a lot of people who would have never even cared or heard or listened to my music were suddenly going, who's Michelle Branch? Who's this girl? I will be the first to admit that the game of love and working with Carlos Santana has made everything just open up for me. Before working with Carlos, I had 3 singles out in the States that actually did really well, but it still wasn't, something was still not there yet. And I always felt like I was kind of teetering, like just waiting to see what was going to happen. You know, it was either, all right, bye, Michelle, make your second record, or, okay, Michelle, everyone's excited, make your second record. And working with Carlos totally tipped me over the fence on the excitement side. Going into the studio at 17 and coming in off the road at 19, there's a big difference of who I was at the beginning and who I am now at the end. Seeing the world, going through different experiences, meeting all sorts of people, having really high highs and really low lows, and also sitting in a chair and talking about yourself all day. In interviews, it forces you to learn a lot about yourself and what you can handle. And I didn't have my parents out with me. I told them to stay home, and I told them that, you know, my parents, I love my parents so much, and they've been so supportive. And I feel bad for them because when it first started, I kept saying, no, I want to do this by myself. You can't come with me. And for them to watch me my whole life and be waiting for this moment and not be able to join me, I'm sure it was really tough on them, but it was something that I had to do. So I, said goodbye to them and went off on my own, and it was me on an adventure, in the big bad world, and it really taught me a lot, and I really grew up a lot, and it helped me, every moment of that tour helped me write this new album. It's funny because the first album was so absolutely easygoing, easy breezy, and I never thought any recording experience could be more enjoyable until this one. And then it was just like a kid in the candy store. I mean, you want an orchestra? Well, you can have it. David Campbell, 22-piece orchestra. Here you go. You want to work with John Leventhal, producer? Sure. He knows who you are. He wants to work with you. It's just absolutely incredible. And not only that, but I feel like everyone who I worked with wasn't just working with me because I was Michelle Branch and this name that they now knew, but they heard my music and genuinely loved it and really wanted to make time to work with me. And that was the most flattering and exciting thing of all. Now I'm just starting to travel around, make it to other countries, make it, to the UK, make it just to Italy and in Europe, and go to Asia, and I am so excited to share the record with everyone. I am just so proud of it, and I know that it's a better record than the first, and so I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping that everyone who bought the last record will buy this one and agree, and hopefully just really respond well to it, because I'm dying to get out and play these songs. I'm dying to just start all over again and go back on the road and be inspired and have more life experiences and write another record.
I always felt very comfortable in front of the camera. And then back at home, there was this musical band that was very successful, not only in Puerto Rico, but all over Latin America. And they were from Puerto Rico. And I said, oh, you know what, Dad? I would like to audition for them. And my dad was like, are you sure? Yes, I want to. Definitely. And to make a long story short, in 1984, I became part of this band. And ever since, it's been nonstop. For me, it was all about waking up early, doing interviews, doing a show, feeling that energy, that adrenaline, and then going to sleep and doing the same thing, next day in another city. I missed my family a lot. I would just call home bawling, saying, I miss you, I miss you. Up to a moment that my mom said, okay, no problem. If you miss us, we'll cancel the contract and you come with us, because I can't stand seeing you like this. And then I said, no, hold on a second. Next day, she would call me back to say, how are you feeling today? I'm fine. Everything is cool. So, I enjoyed music. I enjoy working with people from different parts of the world, and actually working with kids from different parts of the world with different realities in mind. Gave me a lot of balance, I think. So happy I was leaving the band. It was time for me to move on. I started in 1984 and I left the band in 1989, and I was tired. I wanted to take some time off to just do nothing. It was a lot of work, and so in 1989 I decided to go home and finish my high school, and 6 months later, I hopped on a plane again, and I left. I went to New York City. I was 17 years old. I just wanted to get lost in a city, There was a moment that I said, I don't want to be part of the music business or the show business ever again. But that only lasted for 6 months, when then I got tired of doing nothing. And one day I picked up the phone, I called some friends in Mexico City, and I said, what are you guys doing? I'm visiting. This was on a Friday, on a Wednesday. That Friday, I flew to Mexico City. That Saturday, I went to see a show, a theater show, and next Friday, I was already debuting in this play. It was a musical play, the one that I was part of in Mexico City, and then some TV producers came to the show, and they wanted to do a musical show, but for television. And they auditioned me, and I got the part. I was the vocalist for the main song of this TV show, and the record company showed up. Do you really want to sing? And I'm like, yes. And 6 months later, I was releasing my first solo album. Yeah, it was radical. The change was drastic. But I wanted to try something different, and so I did. I went and I did General Hospital. It was full-time acting. 3 years of waking up every day at 6 o'clock in the morning and showing up to a studio, and the routine was what made it so difficult for me. And then the same thing with General Hospital. After 3 years, I said, okay, I loved it. It's time to move on. I learned a lot. I learned a lot of great acting techniques and doing the show. But once again, I needed the reaction of the audience. Then I recorded another Spanish album, did really well in Latin America, but we started crossing over into Europe. After recording the album Vuelve and seeing the reaction of the audience in non-Hispanic countries, I said, well, you know what? Language is not an issue. At that time, I've already had the opportunity to record in Portuguese. We did some things in Italian, even Filipino, in Tagalog. And why not English? I said, let's give it a try. The record company is very open to that idea. But with the album Vuelve, I started doing Spanglish versions of the songs that were becoming a hit globally. For example, The Cup of Life, the original name is La Copa de la Vida, and it was the official anthem for the World Cup in France in 1998. And it was number one in 40 countries, and okay, let's do something in English then. It was a very special evening, and I knew that I was performing in front of the entire industry. But I was ready to go on vacation right after that performance. And that was just a thought. That lasted for 2 minutes after the show because of, the standing ovation and everything. And then right after the show, I hopped on a plane and I went to Italy to do the San Remo Festival. So I had no idea what happened that night. And that morning in Italy, my manager tells me, you have a phone call. And who is it? Madonna. Oh, how cool. 2 hours later, you have a phone call. And it was another legend, So I said, well, we're doing something good because, I'm being recognized by people that I respect and that I admire, that I've admired for many, many years. And that's when the record company said, okay, let's do the English album now. Imagine what it was like to release a press release and the concert on sale today, and 5 minutes later, 60 concerts were sold out. I was enjoying it, but at the same time, I was a little bit in this automatic mode of let's go, nonstop. Let's, okay, they're sold out, open 60 more. And this is what we've been working for many years. I was already tired though, but I was seduced by, once again, the applause. I was seduced by the adrenaline. I was seduced by the industry telling you you're good. And the reaction of the audience was amazing. It was very positive, The album became 4 times platinum in less than 3 weeks. It was beautiful, and this is something that I will, have with me forever. I will die, and I just have to think about those days, and I'll say, it's good. Hopefully if a journalist decides to write a book about music history, I'll be part of it, I stopped for a second to really see and think about my emotions. I looked at where I was coming from. I looked at where I was at that specific moment, and I also took a look at where I wanted to go musically speaking. And I said, we've done great things, but we have to stop for a second, because if not every decision that I take from now on, if it's not analyzed, standing in a very in a healthy spiritual place, could become very autodestructive. And I needed to go back home and spend time with my family and friends and just play with my dogs and travel without thinking about a schedule. And I don't know when when I had that awakening. I was probably on stage. As a matter of fact, I know. I was on stage and I was bored. I was not enchanted by what someone is supposed to feel when you're in front of 30,000 people performing. When I told my managers and my team, what, guys, it's time to go home now and everything, they were like, what are you talking about? No, it's, I think it's time for me to, just go home for a while, and I miss my dogs, And everybody said, well, okay. Well, no problem. And it was the healthiest decision that I've ever. As a matter of fact, I think it's the only decision that I was taking at the moment that was not based on fear. I was really sure about what I wanted. For a moment, I thought, okay, this is it. I've done enough. But that thought only lasted 2 minutes, because I started building a recording studio, and it was so beautiful to dare to feel. It was like, okay, we have to write about what you're feeling right now. How can you be intimate with 30,000 people on stage and not be intimate with a piece of paper? Just dare to write about what you're feeling and turn it into music. So I built my recording studio, and I started working with very young people that have never had the opportunity to express themselves musically, people that were daring, and so hungry to create sounds and just dare, period. And but it wasn't something that I had to do. I was doing it because I wanted to. And I would start working on a track, and when things weren't flowing, I would stop and I would go on the holidays, and 2-3 weeks later I would come back and let me hear that again. Add this, get rid of this. The creative process of this album was so organic, was so natural, was so not painful. One day I was sitting at home, and a colleague, friend of mine, calls me and tells me, Ricky, come on, man, you have to check this out. I go, where are you, man? I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm in India. Come and check this out. What are you working on? I'm working in an orphanage. So I hopped on a plane a day later, and I traveled to Calcutta, and I enter this building full of love. For some months, they had been rescuing girls from the streets that were about to become prostitutes. And I'm like, what is this? This is not real. And they said, you know what? This is something that is happening all over the world. This doesn't happen only in India. It happens everywhere. It happens back at home. And I'm like, no, you have to be. So I started educating myself about child trafficking, and the numbers and statistics that I read about were really alarming. And I said, are we talking about an industry that generates 20 billion pounds every year, and their mission is to rape children, force them into prostitution, into pornography? And no one is talking about this? How come no one is talking about this? Well, because this is organized crime. What do you mean? So I became very stubborn about it, and because I saw it with my eyes. I talked to the victims. I talked to the victims while they were at it, and once they were rehabilitated. And it was very overwhelming, but I said, you know what, I think, everything happens for a reason, and I think that music is only a tool. Let's just think that music is the perfect tool for me to talk on their behalf. And I started knocking on doors, and I went to the UN, and I went to, I started in Latin America, but then I went to the U.S. government, and I talked to senators and Congress people and a lot of activists, and then I became a UNICEF ambassador, and it's been beautiful. Right now it's all about awareness, because people don't know that this is going on. First of all, the album is called Life because in my sabbatical I dealt with life and with death, and I was trying to look for the similarities instead of the differences in everything that was surrounding me, from emotions to cultures. Instead of focusing on the differences of cultures, let's focus on the similarities of cultures. Let's focus on the things that make us smile, and the things that make us dance, and the things that, and it's called Life because I just let life happen smoothly, without fear, and it was great to be lost in the process.
I wish my kids could grow in Barranquilla. Barranquilla is a coastal city of about 3 million people, next to Cartagena, which is a very touristic area of the country. I was fortunate, I had a stable childhood. I was protected by a loving and caring family, and I got all my basic needs covered, which is unfortunately something that a lot of kids in Colombia don't have. It's a country that has been especially hit by injustice and social crisis, and there's millions of kids who don't have the opportunity to go to school. There's about 3 million kids who don't go to school, for example, in my country, and so I could consider myself a lucky child. My grandparents were musicians, not professional musicians, but they used to play the flute and the piano, and the whole family used to gather and meet around them and listen to them play instruments. And that probably has to do with the fact that I'm so, that was always since a very early age, very enthusiastic about music. I always felt passion about music, from a very early age, but I was also very passionate about dancing, and my parents are really stiff. They can't really move much. I don't know why. So sometimes those are one of the mysteries of being alive, being your own person. By the time I was 10, I already knew that I wanted to be a professional singer. So I started doing my first live performances in my hometown, and that's how I got to meet a friend who later on met someone from CBS back then, who apparently got interested in watching me and hearing me, and in one of his visits to my hometown, I performed for this executive of the company a cappella. I sang half of my repertoire, songs that I had already written in past years, and that's how he brought the idea to the other executives at the company, and they decided they wanted to see me. So that's how I flew to Bogota with my mom and performed for all these other gentlemen, and and the next day I got a contract. I was realizing that I was making tangible so many of my dreams, and I was on a mission. I was really concentrated back then. I was a child, but I had an adult's determination, and I knew that I had a destiny don't know why, and don't know in which way. You know, it's very difficult to describe because it was so internalized. But I had this commitment, and it was a serious commitment. I was very serious back then, you know, as serious as I am today. So I had to somehow make a living there, and this opportunity arose. I was semi-popular in Colombia, semi-known, because of my first 2 albums that were relatively exposed, you know, to the public eye, and that's how I got this, you know, this proposal of becoming the main role of a soap opera. Of course, it was very flattering, and I wanted to do it, so I did it, and it was a great experience. But I don't recommend anybody to watch this soap opera piece. It's not one of the greatest works of art that I've done in my life. No, I had a good childhood. I think I enjoyed those years. I probably skipped my adolescence because I always was so, I wanted to be so proper, you know. I never did anything that could detour me from my main path, you know, from that path that would take me directly to my dreams, you know, to encounter them. And so I wanted to be just precise, and I think I didn't have a crazy adolescence, which is what I should have had, you know. So I'll probably live it later on when I'm 65 or something. You'll see me all covered in makeup, partying around like a beast. Writing in English was definitely an intellectual challenge for me because I wasn't really fluent in English 4 years ago, and I just wonder what it'd be like to write songs in a language that is your foreign language, you know. And that's actually something that I've enjoyed so much, and now I'm even writing in German and French, which are languages that I don't speak. But in this past album, I just wanted to experiment a little bit, and I think it worked out, you know. So it's something I enjoy. I enjoy languages too. I wanted to be successful, you know. There's a huge difference between fame and success. I didn't know about fame, you know. That's one thing, but I wanted to be successful. Otherwise, I would have not accepted the challenge, you know. But you know, having had the results that Laundry Sevens obtained around the world was even beyond my expectation. It was more than what I ever dreamed about. Being on the stage in front of an audience is the same sensation. It doesn't matter if you're performing for 20 people in a bar or if you're performing for 20,000 people in an arena, you know. Just the sizes change, but the passion, the need of delivering your heart, your soul, what you have to say, it's always the same. So that really didn't change. It wasn't dramatic that way. But what did change was the way I felt in this new territory, you know, having to adjust and adapt to so many semi-rules of the industry, you know. When I was so used to managing my career in such different way, you know. I remember that when I started with Pies Descalzos, or Bare Feet, which was my third album numerically speaking, but it was the first album that gave me some kind of international success. I didn't have a makeup artist, I didn't have a stylist, I didn't have I have a manager, I had a manager, but I didn't have an assistant, I didn't have a marketing plan, you know, nothing. So I just started with empty hands and started planting my seeds, you know, here and there, and then all of a sudden I got a beautiful harvest. I didn't take a break at all. You know, after my tour of the Mongols ended, I just secluded myself in a recording studio and started writing and making demos of the first ideas I had. And this is a process that extended over 2 years until recently, you know, and I didn't even have time to take any vacation before I released Oral Fixation Volume 1. and even less now that I'm about to release Fixation Volume 2. But believe me, I'm gonna get a sabbatical year sometime soon. It was not thought out to be a double album project, but it just happened, you know. One day I realized I had written more than 60 songs, and I put myself in the difficult task of selecting my favorite ones, which ended up being 20. And that's how I came up with the idea of a double project, you know, or a double album, Volume 1, Volume 2, because I knew it was going to be just too much music to put in one CD. And plus I wanted to introduce my Anglo fans to my Hispanic way of interpreting and expressing my own music. You know, it was so important to me that people from all over the world could get familiar to my music in Spanish as well. And that's probably one of the biggest achievements I've done in my life is just to have a song like La Tortura being number one in so many European countries or Middle Eastern countries. And, you know, when it's a Spanish song, that's something that just, you know, it's a great story to tell my children. Fixation Volume 1 is basically all the Spanish songs that I wrote and produced over these past 2 years. Fixation Volume 2 are another 10 songs, but these ones were written in English and recorded in English as well, and these are completely different from Volume 1. So it's basically a 20 songs repertoire split into two different momentums, you know, two different albums. Volume 1 is very organic, I would say, and Volume 2 has a bit of that too, but I think it also involves more rock and electronic elements. These albums are like my thesis, you know. I feel that I graduated as a producer, as a musician, as an arranger. It's been hard work. It's been like delivering a kid, just that in this case they're twins, so it's double the work but double the satisfaction. Coping with fame and popularity and all of that has been sort of a gradual process, you know. It hasn't happened suddenly. You know, fame didn't knock on my door one day and said, "Hey, I'm your new roommate." No, it wasn't like that, you know. It's been a learning curve, and I feel that my relationship with fame is so old that I already know her very well. I know her vices and her virtues. I know, you know, what her intentions are sometimes, you know, and how I can use her as well. So it's healthy, you know. I never felt that it was something I couldn't deal. And probably the fact that I've been so close to my family my whole life has always given me some kind of perspective, you know. I think it would have been really difficult if I would have started a career like this one that's so invasive and leave my family apart from me for all these years. It would have been crazy. I don't know if I would be the same person I am today. Well, I created this foundation, Pies Descalzos, or Bare Feet, when I was 18, and it's been growing every year a little bit. And today we have almost 3,000 kids who we support with education and food. We have an integrated program that combines both things, because we believe that giving food to these kids who are usually with an empty stomach is a great incentive for them and for their parents to send them to school and to keep them away from violence or even violent environments in which they grow up. Because these kids come from very difficult situations of conflict, you know. They're usually in the middle of this crossfire between the left and the right-wing armed groups in Colombia. And, you know, there's a huge percentage of kids who don't go to school. Actually, there's 3 million kids who don't go to school in my country. And so we wanted to do something about it. And we're building schools in very remote places. And, you know, with this combined nutritional and educational program, we feel that these kids are improving their quality of life. There's so much left. To keep looking for that one song that I haven't written yet, for example. Someday to have a family, you know, my own family, kids, real kids, you know. and I don't know, to just learn from the work that I do with UNICEF as an ambassador. That's something that also constitutes a very important part of my life, you know, as important as the music side, is to be able to, you know, to take both jobs parallel, and be able to do it well. You know, it's one of my biggest goals, you know, and just, you know, keep learning.